Hello class. So in the last video I showed how to sort of take your own image and apply it onto a site model like this, so you don't have to model all this stuff. You can just build buildings on top of it. Sort of like what I've done here, or what I've done in this image. All the site stuff is just pasted on top of a SketchUp model that I downloaded through SketchUp and then modeled the architecture above. Saves a ton of time, looks just as good, arguably looks better because it matches your site plan all that much better. But one thing you'll notice in this one, in that previous video, it's the basics of how to apply an image to a site model like this. But you'll notice that the quality isn't very high, and that's because SketchUp limits the quality that you can import an image to 1024 pixels by 1024 pixels. So it'll just downsample to make your whole image fit within that size, which isn't particularly high quality. Well, there's a way of solving that, which is to do the exact same thing. It's all the same basics, but instead of just bringing it all in as one image, I bring it into a series of images. So for example, if I made this into quadrants, broke it up into 4 pieces, then each piece can be 1024 by 1024, and so on and so forth. So there's different ways of doing this. This is the one that I draped on in the last video. There's different ways of breaking this up. They all are basically the same. You start with exporting a high-level image from Illustrator, which again I'll usually, because I know I'm going to do this step, I didn't do it in the last video, but because I know I have to do this next step, I'll usually export as a PDF to get a higher quality out of it than what I did in the last presentation, and then open it up in Photoshop, which I have already done, of course, taking off all the buildings and trees and shadows because I only want the ground plane here. And so I have an image here. And so one thing I could do, if you're not familiar with too much of the slice tool in Photoshop, I could do some guidelines, crop it into 4 pieces, save them out independently, and there I'd have it. But there's this slice tool which you may not be familiar with in Photoshop, which mine is under my tools here, but it sort of looks like this. And what it does, it'll break the image into segments, so I can keep it as one, and I can always save it, and I can replace the images if I need to update this. I can still have the slices, and the slices will work for re-importing back into SketchUp. So I really like using the slice tool method. It's a little tricky at times. I'm not an expert in it because it's not one of my core features, but I'm gonna show you how to do this. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I am going to sort of cheat a little bit, I think. Not really. I mean, if I go to my image size here, we'll see that my image is actually 3008 pixels by 3072 pixels. And so if I break that into 10 by 24s, it's going to be 3 across by 3 down. That's 9 segments I have to import. I could do it. I've done site plans at 9 pixels or images before, but it's a lot of work, especially for this video. So just knowing that to save time, I'm going to downsample it. You can choose to do it however you want. It works the same. It's just a matter of how many slices you need to do to it. So I know that my big dimension, if I keep it to 2000 or even slightly bigger, I know that I can break it into 4s. 4 segments each size. So I'm just going to say 2000, and of course that translates to a little bit below 2000 there, and there we go. So anyway, I'm going to start with my slice tool here, and I'm going to start by I know this is about quadrants. It really doesn't matter. You have plenty of editing to do so, but I'm going to draw to about from the top left corner to the midpoint, and we see that I've got 3 pieces drawn on top of it. And of course I need a 4th over here, so I will go ahead and draw another slice right about there to get the 4. Now it's still not quite the right size because I just estimated, but what I'm going to do is still being on the slice tool, I'm going to right click over this one and go edit slice options, and down here I can change the numbers. This happens to be a little big, so I'm just going to write 1024 by 1024, and I'm going to say OK. You can see it just shrinks that, and I'll have to, it made a 5th one here. I hate when it does that, but we'll deal with that when we get down to that number. But essentially I'm going to do the same thing for 2. I'm going to go edit, I'm going to edit slice options over it. Now the width in this case, it doesn't need to be another 10 by 24. It knows it's 934 is fine, but I want the height to also be 1024. So I'll just type that in and say OK. We've got this. Oh, it put the 3 in a tiny little spot in there. Let's see if I can get rid of, well, I'll just go edit slice options. I know this one, the height is going to be overshooting if I do 1024, but I'll do it anyway. 1024. There we go. An overshot. Put a little 4 and a 6 in here. Obviously, I think I can just delete 6. I don't need it. And 5 might be off or hiding somewhere, but we can actually see by the time I fix 3 and I delete the little extra ones that were there, the 4th one is in the right spot here. So if I go edit slice options, we can see it's 934 by 936 because it's the last remaining. And maybe you can see the little light brown box there that's saying that it is right to the edges of my pixels. So I've got 4 slices. Again, the reason why I can do it this way and save the Photoshop files, because if I make changes to my site plan, I bring it back into this file, I can have the exact same slices. And I'll have to match those up into Sketchup, which will be the next step here. But first I need to export these. So this is great because what I can do is I can export 4 images at the same time broken up into these exact same segments here by going to File, Export, Export, or save for Web Legacy here. And I've changed mine to JPEG. I'm not sure that's default here, but I usually use JPEG, especially for going into SketchUp, and I changed mine to maximum here. And we can see we got the number 1 slice. That's showing me the top left corner. You don't have to do this. Well, actually, you do have to do this. I apologize. Hit the magnifying glass. I'm going to hit ALT on my PC keyboard just so I can zoom out, because we can see is we've got all of these slices on here represented. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this button, which is Select Slice, and make sure I click on the 1. I'm going to hold Shift to hit 2, 3, and 4. So that they are all selected. And actually, after you do the selection, if you don't have JPEG, you're going to have to select JPEG because each one can operate independently. I want them all the same, so I want them all JPEGs. I want them all set to maximum. So I'll change that now once I see that I have them all selected. And I'll hit Save. And this is where I'm saving it, so I'll just hit Save. And it'll take a few seconds here to sort of generate. And what it's done here is, this is where I saved it. And under images, it just creates these 4 segments that I have right in here, right? So in this file. So I'll just move that back off because I've saved it. Again, I'd save my Photoshop file for later use. Then I'm going to go back into SketchUp. And the reason why, if you remember in the previous video, I said, hey, keep this square for now because this is where it's going to come in handy. I don't actually need that image. So I can delete that image, but what I do need is I still need this square for this next step. And I'm going to, just like before, I'm going to import the pictures, but of course it's going to take 4 times. So I'm going to go import, I have to go where I save them. Second here. So they're right here. I'll start with 1. And right now I'm not too worried about scale, so because they fit like a puzzle, so I'll just start with 1 there. I'll go to import, go to 2, and I'll just select that corner and sort of snap it up to that corner to fit it perfectly there, and then import for the 3rd piece. And actually, just for simplicity, I'm going to put it in the wrong spot just because I can scale it really easy with that click in that segment there, and then I can move it down into its right spot. See, I just wanted the width. I needed the width correct, and since it was bringing it in from this point, I needed to match the width from that point. I was being a little clever there. Import the 4th slice. I can just do this the same, right? Boom, right to there. So I've got it all there. It's not correctly scaled or located yet, but now I'll just select them all. Pick any corner, move it up to this original spot, and then scale this down to that square that I originally had. Oops, I missed. There we go. Got it that time. See, so now I know, since I did it in the single shot, I had it all lined up, which is, again, if you remember in the last video, I said even though I know I'm going to go break it up into slices, I do it often as just a single image, even though I know it's going to be low quality, just so I can make the sliced image all that much easier in the lineup process. Again, the details about how I lined up the first one is important, and you should watch that previous video. So like before, I basically have to explode all of these. Actually, I have to do a couple things here. So I'm going to explode, oops, not export. I'm going to explode this. I'm going to explode this. I'm going to explode this one. and I'm going to explode this one. And what I'm going to have to do, I'm going to just paint these images on top of here, but I need my site to also be broken up into the exact same slices. So now that this is all broken up, the first thing I'm just going to sort of select everything. I'm just going to Control C copy, and I'm going to come into the component or the group that is the site model and paste this right in and select all of this here. And if we remember, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drape these lines right down on top of this to get quadrants out of it. So I'll go to Tools, Sandbox if you don't have it up, and drape that onto here. We can see, boom, I've got my 4 quadrants there. And I can stay in this model, and I can go to my paint bucket tool. Even though I can't see it because I still have it outside the component as well, doesn't matter. I know where it goes. I can ALT to absorb that right into here, paste it on that one. We'll barely see a change because it's the same image, just a higher quality, and we're pretty far out there. Do that. We can see a slight shift there just as the quality changes. And we can see when I zoom in, much higher quality than on the last one. Now, if you're really going to do a zoomed in perspective, you might need to model it. Let's say I'm doing this intersection. I might need to model a few pieces around this intersection. But for large views where you're trying to show the whole site like this, no one's going to ever know. You build the model on top of it, it looks good. So I can come out. There's a few things just to clean up that I'm going to do. Again, what I really don't want to do is I don't want to lose everything of this box up here, so I'm going to keep that up there, move it up nice and high so that when you're looking at down here you don't see it, because again, if I need to edit in the future, I'll just go back into Photoshop, I'll re-export my slices, line them back up with this rectangle right here, paint bucket them right down from on top of them. So I want to keep that. And then the last thing I want to do is looking at these lines. I still have these lines across my site which I can get rid of pretty easily. So I'll just double click to go back in the group. I'm going to select the lines here. In fact, I can, if I don't even care about the edges, which usually I don't, I'll just select everything. And I'm going to hold Shift to deselect the actual faces themselves. Making sure I'm over top of a line, I'm going to go right click and say hide, and it's going to basically hide all the lines, and you'll see it. And you can see a slight shift. Maybe that's in the JPEG there. I'd have to pay closer attention to. I think when I render it, that'll sort of fade away because it's going to, when you render it, even when you export in Photoshop, which isn't the highest quality, it still does a better job. It will still sort of increase the quality of that image. And again, I'll build up the model. And that was quick and easy way to improve it. You can add as many slices as you want. 4 is usually pretty good. 9 I've done before. Above that it gets to be a little bit of a headache, but if you want to, as many slices as you need to get as higher quality as you want to, and it'll all work the same way, just a little bit more time consuming. But again, the reason why I do this is because I can get a ton of site detail that looks really nice with a lot of interesting textures and rendering quality that matches the rest of my presentation really, really quickly. So it's a great technique to use. So with that, we can see how we've got my site design on here. And again, although I'm not going to finish modeling this one, it really is meant to sort of do something like this, that when it's all complete, you've sort of merged Sketchup site, the import, Sketchup modeled, and then site stuff all in here. Of course, I've done some post-processing in Photoshop on this particular image as well, although not a ton. And so you pull it all together and it looks really good. So have fun with that. I think that's a great little tip. It's a series of videos I just did today that my students were generally asking about how to do, so hopefully you'll find this useful. Thank you. Good luck.